In the previous class, we have talked about what it means to write as a visual journalist and how the job of a visual journalist is closely associated with that of a writer or an author, and how our writing practices as a writer or an author can improve our work as a visual journalist as we try to showcase and represent our work through different medias or for various projects. In this class, we are going to learn about different types of writing for visual journalism and for writing practices in general. So whenever we are trying to write something, it can fit into, in general, 4 styles. So for 4 types of different writings, we have expository, descriptive, persuasive, and narrative styles. For expository pieces, whenever we are trying to write in an expository style, what we are trying to do is we are trying to explain a concept or trying to impart information from ourselves and trying to convey that information to a wider audience. For expository writing, it does not include an author or our opinions, but it relies on accepted information or facts, and also sometimes it would include statistics and other data which are available from credible sources. So as a visual journalist, oftentimes you would find that there are events or photo stories that you are having to do, and you will have to incorporate or support your photographs or other visual pieces with credible evidences. So for example, if you're doing a story on COVID-19, maybe you are publishing your photographs, maybe even for captions or a short description for your photographs, you're having to provide a simple stat. For example, if you're working in Dhaka, maybe you have taken a picture of a COVID patient or maybe of a hospital, and then you perhaps have to put one line and include a statistics like what is the current number of patients, active patients who are affected by COVID-19 in Dhaka. So maybe think of something of that sort, and these kind of writing styles are called expository writing styles. Then we have descriptive writing styles. So the other exercise or the assignment that we did in the last class was an example of descriptive writing styles. So descriptive writing is often found in fiction. However, it can also be incorporated and found in non-fiction as well. For example, news pieces and photo stories. Descriptive writing style only provides a general description of the things that you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. So we are using our 5 senses, and we are just trying to put into words our experiences and our impressions of the reality that surrounds us and the reality that we experience. So any kind of writing which describes the surrounding or which narrates what the world is about without any sort of, without any factual detail going on with statistics or other sort of data or imparting data from there. So that would not be descriptive writing style. So descriptive writing would only include a general description of the world as you see it using your senses. So for descriptive writing, the writer or the author is not trying to convince the audience. So that's the reason we don't have any data or any other statistics or any or data from any other sources, because we don't need to convince the audience. All we are trying to do is we are trying to describe, giving a general description of the world as we see it. So that would be an example of descriptive writing style, as we have already done that in our previous practice. So we did a task in which we just gave a general description of the world around us or the room that we were in. That's an example of descriptive writing, as I just mentioned. And for descriptive writing, we would often find examples of descriptive writing in poetry, in even op-ed, or even in magazine pieces. Also, for descriptions of nature, often maybe we are doing a project on nature, or maybe we are doing a project on environment, then our photographs and our visual works would often represent general environmental concerns or just general happenings in nature. So for that we would often need descriptive writing, because we are just trying to give a general description of the nature as it is, and we are trying to incorporate that and include our photographs along with the text. So that's something maybe we can think about whenever we're trying to do a project for which involves nature or environmental concerns. Then descriptive writing style can be of a very good use for us. Then we have persuasive writing style. Now the word itself has the word persuade. So it's for persuasive writing, you are trying to convince someone, you are trying to persuade someone or the audience of your writing to do something. So persuasive writing would contain your opinions and biases, and you would also have to provide your own reasoning and your own logic to convince the audience of your writing. So examples of persuasive writing would include letter of recommendation, or maybe if you're trying to get a grant for your project, then as you would try to write a cover letter, or if you would write a general application, then these would all be examples of persuasive writing styles, because you're trying to persuade the audience and you're trying to convince them through your own reasoning and arguments why they should choose you or why they should fund your project. So whenever you are trying to do that, it's going to be a persuasive writing style. So if you are thinking of writing a proposal, persuasive writing is the style that you want to choose, which would include arguments and which would definitely include your own personal opinions on the subject and why you as a candidate fits their criteria, and why you think why they should choose you, basically. So without having any shred of objectivity, you would just go subjective and explain yourself, explain your opinions, and just try to convince them why they should choose you in general, or why you think you make the perfect candidate. Then we have narrative writing style. Now, narrative writing styles are usually longer pieces. So narrative writing styles are often found in stories which are longer. So for many cases, if you are working as a photographer or as a videographer, you probably won't need a narrative writing style unless you are doing a photo story. Or if you're trying to make a script, then narrative writing style is going to help you in many ways. So narrative writing style is when you just try to tell a story. Just simply tell a story with different characters, which would include conflicts and which would also involve settings. So that's something that we definitely find in films, documentary films. So as a visual journalist, whenever you are trying to document stories of a particular community or of a particular event, narrative writing style can be of use. So if you are just going out there trying to even document a movement, if you're recording a video of it, or if you're archiving it in your own channel, probably on YouTube or probably for other media, then as you go out there and as you describe what you see all around you, and also provide a kind of setting and also try to inform the audience of whatever that's happening, so that's the kind of things that we'd often see, and that is an example of narrative writing styles. When the script is set, when they're telling a story about a particular thing, that's all going to be narrative writing style. So that's something that you can think about and also incorporate when you also try to tell a story. Now, as we have discussed about all these different types of writing styles, now you would often find that these styles would often overlap, and in a single piece of writing you would probably find a mixture of both styles. So depending on what you are trying to do, your writing might often include expository writing styles and also descriptive writing styles. So these are just generally set to identify your writing style, and then you can choose and combine whichever styles suit you and whichever styles represent the work that you're doing in the strongest possible way. So all the styles are there at your disposal, and you have the freedom to choose whichever writing styles that you want to use for your own story. So whenever we're trying to organize the texts with the visuals, these writing styles can help us in many regards, as I have just mentioned. So just choose a writing style, and depending on your visuals, try to identify which writing style would suit you and which writing style would, in the most clear possible way, express what you are trying to say through your visuals, and incorporate that writing style in your writing as you're writing the text for your visuals. Now, that was for writing styles, but when we are also trying to write in different styles, it's also important to think about the things that we are going to put into these writing styles. So how do we choose a writing style? So as I have just said, it depends on the kind of work that you are doing. So we can represent one single story in many different writing styles, and they would have different impacts. So what's very important is to also select your audience, the audience who are going to experience or who are going to read your story in writing, accompanied by your visuals. What's going to create the strongest impact on them? So often we have seen descriptive writing style has its own appeal, but expository writing styles and often persuasive writing style, though it does serve a very different purpose, in many cases we have seen them getting more and more effective, because expository writing styles, since they are often supported by data, they sometimes present themselves as a more credible source. So if I read an expository style of writing, since it's accepted by general data and also supported by evidence, it has this effect on the audience that they somehow tend to believe them more. But at the same time, you have descriptive writing has its own appeal, since it's just generally describing the world around them, even though it appears to be neutral and totally devoid of personal opinions by the photographer or by the visual journalist. Often, as you have done through your own practice in the last assignment, you have probably already have seen that as you try to describe the world around you, it's not just, as it is, because you are having to select. You are selecting different features. You are selecting what you want to put in words and what you want to through your description and what you think is represents the surrounding in the most clear possible way. But that sounds very easy, but when you did it, you have perhaps selected a few things or a few features. So that selection process itself is evidential to what we are trying to say, because you have selected. So whenever there is a selection process going on, either if you're choosing your subject, if you're choosing the topics that you want to talk about, or if you want to select the features that you want to represent, that selection process is never neutral. So that's where the subjective perspectives comes into in these cases. So these are also a few things that you need to think about whenever you are also trying to include these writing styles for your own pieces of work. So putting into perspective is another aspect of this whole of incorporating and combining these writing styles. So what do you want to create? What impression do you want to create? If you are trying to persuade your audience, if you try to mobilize them, if you just want to expose a social phenomenon, if you want to expose social inequalities, then that's something that you are also trying to do through your writing style. So if you're trying to use expository writing styles and trying to expose a social inequality, maybe you are resorting to data relating to poverty, relating to pollution and other things like that. And then you have a descriptive writing styles which you can incorporate to just elaborate and describe the kind of surroundings that a community or a group of people is experiencing. So for example, if you're working on refugees, definitely probably you are going out there in the refugee camps, and then you are just trying to describe the living conditions of the refugees, the kind of experiences that they are having, their own stories. So you are just extracting these pieces. Now, as you combine these writing styles and as you put them into perspectives, you would often realize that they are very purpose driven, and you are already they're already perspectivized in the way that you already know which perspective you want to put them into, because you have a very clear agenda. So if you are in an assignment given by your institution or a company or your media house, then you know that they would definitely provide you with a set of guidelines that you have to follow, and the kind of things that they want you to document and want you to collect from the setting or the context or the field that they have sent you to. So they would often dictate the kind of writing style that you would choose for your own visual story or your visual project. So these are just a few things that we need to think about. Now, for an assignment, maybe try to write 4 pieces incorporating these 4 different writing styles. So we have expository writing style. So try to write 2 lines about which would involve in expository writing style. So for example, as the example was given, so we are all affected and inflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So just try to imagine that you are doing a photo story on COVID-19, or maybe you have just taken a photograph of a patient or of a hospital during the pandemic. Now, just try to write a caption which would involve expository writing style. So that's going to be one task. And for the other, then we have a descriptive writing style. So since you have already done a descriptive writing style in the previous class, we can skip that part. And if we move on to the persuasive writing style, maybe just simply try to write a cover letter. Now we are going to elaborate on this point because we have another session dedicated exclusively to producing and planning a proposal. So if it can wait for later, but if you want to just practice a little bit, then maybe just try to write a cover letter, not long, just about 500 words about yourself. And imagine you writing it for a grant. So keeping an audience, a learned audience in mind who's going to examine and scrutinize your piece. Keep that audience in mind and just try to write in 500 words about yourself and why you excel as a photographer or as a visual journalist. So imagine that scenario and just try to write 500 words in the persuasive writing style. For narrative writing style, since it's a bit longer, maybe try to come up with a story. So imagine a refugee, or imagine a person from a marginalized community, can be someone from an extremely poor family, or it can be your own house help in many cases. So just pick an example. It can be a refugee, it can be your own house help, or it can be someone from an extremely marginalized community, and just try to narrate their story. So maybe in this case you would have to do a bit of research in terms of talking to them, or in terms of just going online and trying to search for some narratives. But do that research, and based on your research, just try to come up with a piece of writing which would involve a narrative writing style, as I just said. In the next class, what we will be doing is we will be learning about writing for pictures. So we would learn about how to write captions, what we should include in captions, and what can make an effective description for a picture.